Oh boy.
Here we are.
Yes, we are, and we are resilient. We are war. Let's go, baby. How's it going, Mikey? 40 Mike in the house.
Feeling good. I don't got any shades on this week.
It's
The
been a,
eyes,
it's been a wild start to the year for you, man.
it has indeed, but I'm getting my visits in at the VA. I'm being able to check in on the local scene as it's developing. And, a lot of crazy stuff is, been, pitched in the rumor mills left and right. But from what I've been seeing on campuses is things seem to be going okay. There have been some people in departments that have been gone. Some people have then returned. So this is an ever-changing situation.
Well, that is one thing I think I really want to dig into is a lot. Excuse me. Wow, man. A lot of people are very apprehensive right now. A lot of unknown stuff going on. I have people tell me that VA staff are being cut, or they're being forced to commute now, or they're shutting down telehealth, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and I can get why people are nervous. The VA secretary is on record that we're not going to cut benefits, but it's something else.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing is we're actually, I don't know how many guys out there actually have been watching like the subcommittees. But if you watch like the subcommittees on veteran affairs and you watch the subcommittees on like armed forces, like you can really see like your veteran service organizations are going to bat and making sure that things that are happening are either reversed, done in a manner that is, fair to the people that they're, working with, or that it's, they're making sure that it doesn't happen at all. They're letting people know that if, the rumor of 80,000 people being cut from the VA, if that were to happen, that would be, mission critical, and it would harm the VA to an extent where, it may not be recoverable because of how many veterans have come on since the PACT Act, last year, and how well that has done, educating the community and educating veterans to come in, get seen, the presumptive claims. Uh, I want to say there was something like 19 million veterans had put in claims, and there's something like 12 million new veterans into the system.
That's the thing that's kind of like getting me is I didn't have the exact numbers on the PACT Act ads, but I'm like, okay, maybe there's some waste or some dead weight to get rid of. Sure, it's a massive organization. I'll pull up here how many people the VA employs, but I don't think that you would have the PACT Act come in and then fire everybody who's supporting that. They're still onboarding people. Even though the signups are done, now they're trying to get these people like sorted to the right specialist. Can we get, care programs, the whole 9 yards? It just didn't make sense. But, it seems like that, we need to be careful. And I just don't want people getting complacent.
Yep, absolutely, and that's definitely one of the tougher things is is going in there and feeling like you've got something and then not realizing that everything's going to change on us. All right,
Right.
so I've got looking at the current PACT Act benefits. Total PACT Act claims approved is 1,500,033 and 309. PACT Act related claims completed 2 million plus 37.1% PACT Act related claims completed in less than or equal to 125 days. And yeah, it's showing that they're still kicking butt with this. There's been 6 million total toxic exposure screenings done. There are 4 million
Wow.
current enrollees in the PACT Act planning population. Um, there's a lot of veterans and survivors too. Is big on this one. Uh, Total veterans and survivors with completed PACT Act related claims: 1,625,620, and that's in a year. And the big thing too, like I mentioned last week, uh, with the PACT Act is it's making sure you file for these things and get them on your record, because if you do happen to leave this world early due to one of these things, your surviving spouse or your surviving next of kin can get your benefit.
So according to what I'm seeing here from the Federal Times and let's see here, I'm going to look at the Sec uh, Dev VA dashboard
Hmm.
for fiscal year 23. There was an average of looks like let's just call it 420,000 um, people working for the VA. Not insignificant, dude.
Hmm.
And so, what 80,000 people? This is fiscal year 23, so I don't know what 24 is. I don't have that in front of me yet. So you're looking at anywhere from 15 to 20% of the workforce. Well, and that's if the 80,000 are all full time employees, not consultants. That's also something I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, and it shows too the VA, like you've got 7,000 employees that have been onboarded for PACT Act just to help with the toxic exposure. You've got 9 that were in there to help with the program management. A lot of these things. If these folks hadn't gotten past uh, their probationary terms, may have been let go.
Right, right.
Well, like I said, and then due to the recent ruling, have been told to go back to work.
So I just want people to be mindful of what's going on. Certainly, there's concern that things might go awry, but I also don't want there to be like, hey, you know, I guess I'm trying to say is I want us to avoid
The
uh,
sky is falling.
the sky's falling. But I guess for me, Mike, it's good to know that hey, the VFW, American Legion, DAV, all these orgs are like, hey, we're going to go to bat for you all. I think I was kind of getting concerned that maybe that wasn't happening.
No, like I said, that's one of the things that I've recently gotten into on YouTube, is following the the Senate and the House committees for Veterans Affairs and for the armed services, because both on both sides they've been pushing, whether it be the VSOs, and like yesterday or the day before they were talking about TAP and the transition from active duty, and if it's the program's enough to give people 5 days of transition workshop, when we spend so much time recruiting people and training people when they first get in. Why aren't we putting more emphasis on giving them training and setting them up for when they get out?
Well, I think that's it's one of those weird things where if you're going to retain people, you're going to have to, either a make it worth their while to stay in, or B, if you're not going to stay in, realize that it's truly their best the recruiters or other people who served.
Yep. And
And I
that
think
was
they're
one of
start
the biggest arguments was, saying that, guys that didn't have a good, transition, and guys that, the commanders, waived their going to TAP so they could go to a field exercise, or so they could do, some sort of nonsense that wasn't actually mission critical.
Yep.
Those guys get out and then they tell family and friends f being in the service. That shit's not for me. It should be for you because like you said, veterans are the best recruitment that we have out there, and the word of mouth from other folks that have served is the one that carries on. Family legacies count for so many. I remember you look around and you hear people's stories. It's like my dad served, my uncle served. Somebody in your life served that put that in your mind that it was something that you'd want to accomplish.
Well, and as I do have concerns, understandably, about our Secretary of Defense. People have asked me about the Secretary of the VA. I said, well, you know, so far it's a wait and see with me still. Um, I guess I've heard anecdotally some veterans are concerned about service, but I haven't heard anybody being turned away yet.
But I do not like our VA secretary. I will say
You
that
don't,
flat out. He's very much used car salesman. He seems to be pushing information that isn't relevant to the situation. He's doing the old look over here when we're doing stuff over here.
in what
And
way?
um, when the programs were cut and the contracts were eliminated from the VA by Doge and crew, uh, he had put out a statement that saying that a lot of them were uh, duplicate or programs that didn't need to be run. But he didn't put out that a lot of these programs were disabled veteran, small, uh, small businesses,
Right, right,
disabled veteran owned small businesses. And like, it didn't put out that, not only are they ending these contracts, but they're also putting a veteran out of work. And then, and these companies and these are things that veterans have established. He said that they were duplicates, but then you go and they look at them, and only got to see a few of them, but none of them that I saw were a duplicate of anything. It'd be one thing if it was doing the same service, but when you've got checks and balances going on, that's not being a duplicate. That's making sure that you're not doing something that you shouldn't be, or it's making sure that that funding goes here, or make sure that folks are trained in a certain aspect. And it really got me sideways that it's just saying these are all duplicate you know things that are being cut, and then to see the list, and they're not. And that's one thing I've been trying to push and see if I can get is a list of those companies that are cut, because it is really tough to find any information. And that's the other thing that I don't like is they keep talking about transparency, 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 but then when you go to look for information to see how many of these organizations that were cut were disabled veteran owned, how many were spouse owned, that information isn't out there.
right, right. Um, I think it's too early for me to tell. Um, I've heard a lot of stuff anecdotally. I know that 80,000 is a big number. I guess my biggest concern right now is the telehealth worked, the remote telehealth, the remote support for veterans. So, they were letting people, care providers, stay at home and work, and nobody's going to come in the office. They're just going to be on Zoom calls all day, and we veterans liked it. And now they're like, hey, we don't care. Come in the office, and we might have to have you come in the office. So I'm like, why take the step backwards when it's working? Um, I guess the thing I'm pleased to hear about, I didn't know that I was like, well, where's the VFW and American Legion through all this? You pay all these money in dues and support and stuff like that. Where is it? And I'm glad to hear that that's happening.
Yeah, no, the VFW national commander was right there, on, the day after all these cuts were happening, making his statements before the Senate committee, and it's and that's tough too, is because like our politics is so divided that like in order to get what's actually happening, you have to read what the majority says, but then you also have to read what the minority says, and you have to kind of put them together and take from it. Some of it's gonna be bogus. Tooting their own horn, and you gotta actually get to the meat and potatoes of what the article's saying and what they're actually pushing for.
What do you see as the end game for this? I mean, is there are we truly in danger of losing, what we worked for?
I'm worried that they're still going to push for these cuts and to bring the staffing levels down, and I don't think that there is a proper plan on like how to do the cuts and where to do the cuts. And I think there's just they're more worried about a number than they are worried about how it will affect the bottom line. They're not looking to cut you know the money to a certain extent. They're looking and they're cutting X bodies. They're cutting they're saying that they want the Department of the Veteran Affairs to reduce their annual budget by a certain amount. And like the other thing that really drove me crazy was they had, I want to say, $5.1 million in like cuts and stop programs for Department of Defense, but then we gave them an extra $100 billion in the continuing resolution.
I didn't see that. Thanks for telling me. One other thing I want to bring up to you that someone had me look up. Um, there's a bill being floated up in the House. I think it's where it's at right now, where it will streamline letting a veteran use Medicaid or Medicare to get care instead of going to the VA. And it's being touted as a way to gain efficiency and make it better for the veteran. And I'm just concerned that if it's allowed to go through, this is just a feasibility study because the bill's about doing a study to see the efficacy of allowing veterans to use Medicare, Medicaid. And I think it's just a way to wrap it up and say, hey, we're going to test this out for data points. And if it works, it's going to be policy. And I don't know if I'm being a worry wart or just uninformed.
I'm trying to see if I can
Yeah, let
see
me
if there's
pull
anything on that here.
finance a bill to get veterans on.
So yeah, March 11th was the hearing with the VSOs to review pending legislation and to see what was going on. Um, they're trying on the 26th. They introduced legislation to improve efforts to prevent veteran suicide. Uh, Deputy Secretary of Veteran Affairs Paul Lawrence was confirmed today.
Yep.
I don't know much about him. I just got in today. But I mean, these sites I'd never, had gone into and used before until this year. So it's to me it's a resource that I'm learning now that I didn't realize was so much information is there, and you can see what's actually going on within the department, and what we need to be either writing letters to our local representatives or letting folks know get these programs to be talked about, because if you go to these town halls or you get these email campaigns going, it really does get a program funded or defunded.
Yeah. Yeah.
If nobody's out there fighting for it, it's going to go in the wind.
And that's what I'm trying to tell veterans. I said, hey, there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of hearsay, and a lot of things being thrown around. Now's the time for us all to band together across branches, across MOSs, across veteran statuses, and percentage of ratings, and make sure a message is being sent. Because I'm sure you've seen it, Mike. Once they take a benefit away, it's not coming back. They
Yep.
will do anything besides bring it back, and it's a piece of low hanging fruit that people want to cut because they think the VA is that big. I'm like, well, yeah, there's millions of veterans out there, and out of those millions, a good percentage of them need health care and other things.
And these folks, they don't see it like that. They just to see how many people are like, yay, let's get these cuts. But then when they're not actually, you know, making the cuts in the right places, it gets worrisome. But like folks, when they're worrying about their benefits, the best thing that you can do is one, make sure that you're permanent and total. You know, you're still getting rated, for something, and you have to do a checkup yearly on it, and you're not, rated, permanent for it. Make sure you're getting in there. Make sure you're working with a representative, and making sure you're covered.
Yep, yep.
That's the biggest thing you can do is have somebody go over uh your award letter with you. Have somebody go over what you have and make sure everything's there and will stay there, because that's one thing you don't want to miss with all this happening is you get a letter that maybe goes to an old address, and then you don't go to an appointment, and all of a sudden you've lost 20%. And if you lose that 20% at 100%, now you're down to 80%, and you've lost 50% of the monetary benefit, and you've lost the dental, you've lost vision, and all of these other things. Good evening, Valhalla. He's been uh
R2,
he's been having some baby goats show up at the farm lately.
baby goats are the best.
Absolutely. He does a live stream right inside the barn. And let me tell you, if you've been having a tough day and you need something to be serendipitous to relax and unwind to, watching the goats play and hang out, that's where it's at.
So what else you got going on, Mikey?
We've got on April 19th a coffee and camaraderie event going on over at Post 443 in North Attleboro. This will be our fifth one. Each time we do it, they're getting bigger and better. We've got Bedard Realty is actually funding the donuts and coffee for us. So they heard what we were doing, and they want to throw in and help out. And they actually want to see about doing something else to get more folks in, whether it's some sort of door prize or some sort of raffle, to get more veterans to be involved.
Nice, nice, awesome,
And
awesome.
and then that's been really successful over there. And then just working away here and seeing what other ways that we can reach the veteran community. We may have a link in one of your local communities to be looking at sharing, war highlights.
All right. Well, I gotta get ready for my other show, man.
Yes.
But
What do you have going on this evening? I believe I have a overlay here.
okay, go ahead and show it.
Boom. Pull up. There we go.
So Margaret Lapointe is a civilian, but her family, her father and her grandfathers were all veterans, and so she advocates in the veteran space. She had started off with advocating for military kids, military families, and now is a director of development for a bigger org, 220, and they provide therapy and healing for veterans suffering from PTSD or the kinds of mental trauma.
Now, are they just veterans, or do they do first responders as well?
They do first responders too. Thank you. They do first responders and veterans.
Excellent. So, and then 8 o'clock
8
on
o'clock.
your local places to pick up podcasts. Don't forget, YouTube, Spotify. You know
Everywhere.
that YouTube is actually the #1 place for podcasts right now.
Yeah, I read that the other day. Like, and I guess it's not only their audio podcast thing has gotten dialed in, but it's of course for video. The place. So
Absolutely. So check it out. At 8, I'll be in the chat, and Travis will be chatting at
absolutely,
times, and then also in the chat as well. So we'll see you
absolutely.
guys at 8 p.m. Enjoy the night. Thank you for joining W.A.R.
We are resilient. We are W.A.R. Thank you so
We'll see
much.
you guys next